Hello students, welcome to Nonviolence and Peace Action, Week 10, Religious Influences in Peacebuilding. Today's objectives are as follows. We're going to discuss Research Paper Part 3, which is due on Monday, April 21st. We're going to look at peacebuilding and religion, especially the Golden Rule. And we'll look at two case studies, Mohandas Gandhi, Peacebuilding and Religion, and Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Peacebuilding and Religions. The directions are as followed. First, I would like you to open a Google Doc and share it with me at zenob@tcnj.edu. I'd like you to put your name on the document, and then you are going to write the questions and answer the questions. Some of the questions will be written for you in the slides. Other questions will be asked of you in the screencast. Okay, the document with the answers are due by 8 p.m. Thursday, April 17th. The Research Paper Part 3, End of Conflict, Your Country Today, and Analysis and Conclusion is due on Monday, April 21st. All of the information is here on the slide, and don't worry, if you can't see everything on this slide, we have this in multiple presentations, so week 8 and week 9, so you can go back. I am looking for details, like End of Conflict is a minimum of 2 pages. Country Today is a minimum of 1 page. Your Analysis and Conclusion is a minimum of 1 page. So a total of 4 full pages minimum. Okay, so the first thing I would like you to do is watch the video that you see here, the Imam and the Pastor. And in that Google Doc, I would like you to answer the following questions. What roles can religion play in peace building? And can people with different religious convictions find common ground as they face these challenges, even while continuing to disagree on other matters? This will go onto the Google Doc with both the questions and the answers. When you are ready, pause this video, this screencast, and go to that video. So tonight we are exploring the relationship between religion, peace, and violence. Over half of people in the world belong to just a few religions. Christianity has 2 billion followers, Islam has 1.5 billion followers, and Buddhism and Hinduism has 1.5 billion followers. All 4 religions follow the ethic of reciprocity, which we know as the Golden Rule, which directs people to care for everyone equally without considering whether they are a part of one's own family, tribe, or community. So let's explore this idea of the ethics of reciprocity. So Judaism, it pertains to this quote, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. This is the law. All the rest is commentary," from the Talmud. In Christianity, "Therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets," from the book of Matthew. In Islam, quote, "None of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself." Number 13 of Imam al-Nawawi's 40 hadiths. In Buddhism, quote, "A state that is not pleasing or delightful to me, how could I inflict it upon another?" In Hinduism, "This is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you." This traditional guiding rule was so highly valued that for centuries it's been known in English as the Golden Rule. So in the Google Doc, please answer the following question. Why do people who practice religion participate in war? Sorry about that. Why do people who practice religion participate in war? Put that in your Google Doc. Although the ethic of reciprocity is found in the traditions of over 4 billion believers, the idea of loving one's neighbor has not consistently inspired most believers to seek alternatives to violence and war. Each religion increased their support for violence and war as it gained civil and political power. Christianity is an example of this that we're going to speak about today. Just a caveat before proceeding, this is not an indictment of Christianity or any religion. Religion plays an extremely important role in the lives of those who follow it. In fact, it plays an important role in peace building as well. We will explore that role in this screencast, but first we will look at how religion plays a role in war and power first. Speaking in terms of Christianity, most of the first Christians and their early converts understood Jesus' teachings as an exhortation for people to care for friend and foe alike. Christianity became popular because it catered to those on the margins: prostitutes, tax collectors, slaves. The early emphasis on the ethic of reciprocity was one of the principal reasons why it went from a few hundred believers to a massive movement with millions. Why? Because harming others was forbidden, and most early Christians refused to serve in the Roman army. They followed the example of turn the other cheek. Okay? So an example from Christian history is Clement of Alexandria in 280, who stated, quote, "The church is an army of peace which sheds no blood." Their ethic of concern generated communities that cared for one another in ways that impressed outsiders and encouraged converts. Women were important in Christianity. They were valued significantly more within early Christianity than in its surrounding society of the time. Why were they valued? Well, let's look at the main practices. Christians rejected abortion, incest, infidelity, infanticide, polygamy, and divorce, while others in society practiced them. As a result, this increased well-being and fertility of Christian women relative to non-Christians. A higher proportion of women in Christian communities led to women frequently marrying non-Christian men who then converted in many cases. Overall, Christianity's ethics of reciprocity represented an attractive alternative to the various other generally more pessimistic belief systems available at the time. The Golden Rule remained a central principle in Christianity for about 300 years. Then Constantine came to power. Emperor Constantine transformed Christianity into the official and favored state religion in 312 AD. He had a dream that Jesus commanded him to carry the sign of the cross into battle. At that battle, he claimed to have seen a burning cross in the sky. This was a complete contradiction of Christian values. Constantine won the battle and concluded that Christian symbols and soldiers could gain him greater power. As a result, he offered Christian men preferential treatment to join the army. He promoted Christianity throughout the empire. He built 3 churches: St. Peter's in Rome, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. At this point, Christianity became a state-sponsored religion. He used state funds to support and control Christian congregations and priests. He proclaimed the Roman day of the Sunday as the day of rest for everybody. Religion now became part of the government. Now Christianity became associated with statecraft, execution, conquest, and war, and it focused, like most other ancient dictatorial governments, on power and control. About a century after Constantine, Emperor Augustine justified the new Christian endorsement of violence with his influential distinction between different moralities supposedly required in God's and man's realms. He created the idea of the city of God, that the ethics of reciprocity belongs to the city of God, and in this realm, goodness is unattainable on earth. Thus, this is the concept of heaven. Then there was the city of man. Augustine argued that Christians living on earth could participate in slavery, torture, violence, and war. He created guidelines on how war should be fought. And since Augustine, Christian groups have frequently engaged in wars, most often with each other. The ethics of reciprocity after Constantine was mostly forgotten among Christians, but it never disappeared. Some sects and individuals insisted that the lesson be applied equally in the city of God and the city of man. So monastic orders were created to assist people who desired to imitate the original Christians while living in non-violent communities. Then the Protestant Reformation happened, where several peace churches emerged to practice the ethic of reciprocity and oppose the claim that harming others is acceptable Christian behavior. The examples would be the Church of the Brethren, Mennonites, and the Quakers. But there were other peace churches as well that came before the Protestant Reformation. Other examples include the Cathars, who were in France in the 11th to 13th century. Many minority sects, like the Cathars, named themselves good Christians, who were willing to disobey the church by opposing violence and killing. So what did the church do? The church hunted them down and killed them. Peter Chalsicki was a nonviolent Christian group leader from the Czech Republic during the 15th century before the Reformation. He wrote a piece called The Net of Faith in 1443, calling for the Pope and European leaders, calling them actually whales, who tore the net of the true faith. They called for people to refuse to go to war and go back to the ethics of reciprocity. He was also hunted by the Christian church. He had to go underground. The Anabaptists were another nonviolent Christian group from Switzerland in the 16th century. They opposed violence and were attacked for their beliefs as well. There is one unique situation that occurred that was antithetical to religion and power. The state of Pennsylvania, when it first was established, was governed by the ethic of reciprocity for half a century, for 50 years. King Charles II gave Penn the territory known as Pennsylvania as a payment of debt owed to his father. Penn was a convert to the Society of Friends, which is another name for the Quakers, and he followed the teachings of George Fox, who was an impactful Quaker. So Pennsylvania was governed using George Fox's ideas under the leadership of William Penn. These were the ideas. Rituals could be safely ignored as long as one experiences a true spiritual conversion. The qualification for ministry is given by the Holy Spirit, not by ecclesiastical study. This implies that anyone has the right to minister, assuming that the Spirit guides them, including women and children. God, quote, dwelleth in the hearts of his obedient people. Religious experience is not confined to the church building. Indeed, Fox refused to apply the word church to the building, instead used the name steeplehouse, a usage maintained by many Quakers today. Fox would just as soon worship in the fields and orchards, believing that God's presence could be felt everywhere. And though Fox used the Bible to support his views, Fox reasoned that because God was within the faithful, believers could follow their own inner guide rather than rely on strict readings of the scripture or the word of clerics. Fox made no clear distinction between the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. As a result, Penn's governance led to what's called the Holy Experiment. Okay? He produced a society with little persecution or violence. There was a high level of religious tolerance. All sexes and races were offered equal protection under the law. Indigenous peoples, Native Americans, were treated fairly. There was no capital punishment, no slavery, and as a result, it became the least violent and the wealthiest of all the colonies at the time. Unfortunately, popularity made it go wrong. There was a large influx of people, and these newer residents wanted to reverse the Golden Rule. They joined the military for the British against the French and the Indians during the French and Indian War. And to give you an example, Benjamin Franklin was an advocate of that fighting. So at the end of 1774, that year was the end of the ethic of reciprocity, and it came to a democratic end. Let's talk about how religion is influential in peace building now. We're going to look at our case studies. Religious leaders like Mohandas Gandhi made an impact. He started in South Africa in the early 1900s, fighting for a campaign of justice for the Indian minority of South Africa. He returned to India in 1915 to fight British oppression and created a mass movement that focused first on promoting economic and political equality. Then he fought for India's independence from England. The Salt Satyagraha was the most influential nonviolent action in history. In 1930, Gandhi wrote to the British authorities that he was leading a 240-mile march from Gandhi's home to the sea. Then they would break the law by harvesting salt from the sea. Gandhi offered to stop the march if the UK would stop taxing private production of salt. It was ignored. He and his followers walked 24 hours a day, then stopped to explain the purpose of this movement. This increased his followers, and the press published articles in papers about him. On April 6, 1930, Gandhi and hundreds of Indians stopped at the shore of the Dandi, broke the law by taking salt, and challenged the legitimacy of the government. The authorities did nothing. Gandhi wrote to the authorities again, declaring that he would lead the marchers in seizing the Dharasana salt works. The viceroy ordered their arrest. but the salt works were seized by other followers. They were beaten and hundreds were arrested, but none fought back. Even though Gandhi was in jail, this event was the catalyst for many additional nonviolent actions. 60,000 were arrested. The Viceroy did not lift the tax, but Gandhi saw the action as successful. Indians could remain nonviolent in the face of violence and oppression. The UK revealed to the world that the rule was immoral and based on force, not consent, and made it possible for new actors to stand up to authority and laid the groundwork for future nonviolent actions and the eventual downfall of direct British rule in India. Gandhi was inspired by the Peace Church's interpretation of Christianity as well as Hinduism. In Hinduism, the Mahabharata is the ethic of reciprocity. Gandhi embraced this principle as central to Hinduism. There are less texts written in Hinduism. Instead, there are more customs, rituals, and traditions. Gandhi based his interpretation on one book, the Bhagavad Gita. It tells the story of Krishna persuading Arjuna to slaughter his cousins and teachers. Arjuna is reluctant. He fled combat and expressed opposition to killing them. Krishna appeals to his masculinity and convinces him to return to the battlefield to kill. Surprising that Gandhi would use this, but he saw it as an allegory on the ethics of reciprocity. The battle discussed in the book is a metaphor of struggles between the lower and higher selves. Krishna is telling us to kill our lower selves, our more basic selves, the attachment to desires. Gandhi advised people to treat friends and foes alike. Gandhi practiced satyagraha, the practice of seeking truth in order to guide right action. He believed that deep truths form a bedrock reality that can be neither created nor destroyed. Satyagrahis were people who sought to guide their lives through a continuing search for eternal truths. Satya truths would endure once an individual's acts and life was done. For Gandhi, satyagraha was an ethical search for truth through nonviolent actions. It's a method of testing truth and transforming conflict through the power of law. Satyagraha is often translated as soul force or truth force. Gandhi envisioned thousands of well-trained, unarmed volunteers patrolling troubled communities to keep peace. Check out the video of Gandhi's March to the Sea. Pause this screencast to watch the video and then go to the next slide. Abdul Ghaffar Khan was a follower of Mohandas Gandhi, and he also rose up against the British imperialists who took over his area, which is known as the Khyber Pass. He is a Pashtun who suffered at the hands of the British for over 80 years. What I'd like you to do is read the article and watch these videos. I would like you to write down the questions and answer them in the Google Docs. I know that the last question is being hidden by the toolbar that you see here, and here is that last question. What does the author of the article suggest about the enduring legacy of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, particularly in relation to women's rights and community activism? What does the author suggest about the enduring legacy of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, particularly in relation to women's rights and community activism? Abdul Ghaffar Khan was a Muslim leader who promoted nonviolent action against the British. Khan took key passages from the Quran and applied them to peacebuilding and nonviolent strategies. He used Islamic values of the Pashtuns to fight British imperialism. The Pashtuns inhabited the overland gateway to India through the Khyber Pass, and the stakes in this region were high. The British were determined to hold the region at any cost. Pashtuns engaged in guerrilla warfare with the British for over 80 years. And the Pashtuns had a reputation of being highly vicious and violent, but this was absolutely not true. I'm going to summarize Johansson's article about Khan called Radical Islam and Nonviolence, a case study of religious empowerment and constraint among the Pashtuns. The point of his article was that one system of values, in this case Islam, can be interpreted and applied in very different ways for war and for peace. So think about the Bible and all the ways people interpret the Bible for their own purposes. Contrary to the idea that Pashtuns were all about war, Robertson describes a Pashtun pacifist movement inspired by Gandhi. Khan was a devout Muslim and son of a respected chieftain. He had a personal calling to God to uplift his people through social reform and education, and he created an army of nonviolent soldiers that could be drilled, disciplined, and who pledged to fight, not with guns, but with their lives. He created an organization called the Servants of God, who were committed to using nonviolent action to achieve political, social, and economic reform. He established an officer corps. He organized members in platoons and taught recruits basic army discipline. Women were also recruited. Khan used Pashtunwali and the Quran to justify peace. The Pashtuns signed up and signed a pledge based on their honor to institutionalize peace. They used military discipline, a ban on violence, civil disobedience, and always relied on the words of the Prophet. The nonviolent actions used by the Servants of God were the refusal to pay taxes, ostracizing collaborating officials, refusing participation in the British courts, picketing, and boycotting. Sorry about that. It's right before school starting. The British response was not surprising. Violent repression, mass arrests, burning of villages and food stores, raping, and killing. After perpetrating a terrible massacre in 1930 in Peshawar, the British saw the ranks of the servants swell from several hundred to 80,000 people. As a result, they played a significant role in liberating their country and helping, in terms of what Gandhi would say, an ocular demonstration to the world of the power of nonviolence. So how is religion used for peace building? In this case, Islamic religious identity provided the basis for the following: recruiting people to become political activists, for nurturing a strong identity and discipline within their movement, for enabling activists to overcome their time-honored inclination to use violence, for contesting the more violent elements of a religious tradition rather than in secular terms, for avoiding intolerance towards people of other religious traditions, for nurturing nonviolent contributions that religious traditions could make. When religion is used for peace building, it is quite powerful because of the idea of the ethics of reciprocity, the fact that everyone can contribute to the cause, and that it's for ultimately the good of the people. It is one of the best ways to bring about peace in a nation. In conclusion, I'd like to talk about Abdul Ghaffar Khan and the myths of nonviolence. That is the recourse of the weak. The British never brought the Pashtun territories under subjection in 100 years of violence. When Khan once asked Gandhi why his Pashtuns were staying the course when many Hindus lost their nerve and fell back on violence, Gandhi said, "We Hindus have always been nonviolent, but we haven't always been brave." The myth of that it only works against a polite opponent. The British were terrified and ruthless towards the Pashtuns, whom they regarded as brutes, to be ruled brutally by brutes. The British Empire showed its true colors because back in the day, they controlled the propaganda around the world that they were a polite government helping people learn the rule of law, and that they were benevolent and paternal, and that was absolutely not true. And the way they treated the Pashtuns and other groups of people was through absolute brutality. The myth that it has no place in war, nonviolence. 80,000 uniformed, trained, and indomitable Pashtuns were the world's first army of peace. And finally, that the myth of nonviolence, that it has no place in Islam, is absolutely not true. Malala, in Khan's footsteps, pointedly referred to the tradition of peace and nonviolence in Islam, as in all world religions, and that nonviolence means protest and non-cooperation. It includes that, but as with Gandhi's constructive program, it often gains even more traction with self-reliance, constructive work, and cooperating with good where possible. The last question that I would like you to address is the following. What did you learn about religion and nonviolence that is beneficial to society from this screencast? What did you learn about religion and nonviolence and how it benefits society from listening to this screencast? That is your last question to write down and answer. There are no reading assigned for this week coming up. Instead, I want you to focus on research paper part 3, which is due on Monday, and I would like you to have a great weekend. Take care.